I never expected to find the ring, but there it was, tucked away in Ethan's sock drawer while I was searching for a pair of scissors. A diamond the size of a small fruit basket and a receipt with Avery's ring size. Hey there, wonderful people. Before we dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Let's get into this wild story. I never intended to find the ring, but there it was, hidden in Ethan's sock drawer while I was looking for a pair of scissors, a diamond the size of a small planet, and a receipt with Avery's ring size, not mine. My hands shook as I held the small velvet box. The diamond caught the afternoon sunlight streaming through Ethan's bedroom window, sending reflections dancing across the wall. 2 years together, and now this betrayal was literally sparkling in my palm. I checked the receipt again, hoping I'd misread it. Size 6, Avery's size. I wore a 7.5. There was no mistake. I'd only come over to borrow Ethan's fancy scissors for a work project. He was in the shower singing some Bruno Mars song off-key, completely oblivious to the fact that his world, our world, was about to implode. The scissors he'd called from the bathroom were probably in his desk, or maybe the dresser. "Just look around, babe," he'd said, his voice muffled by the water. So I did. And now I knew the truth. I carefully placed the ring back exactly as I'd found it, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe this wasn't what it looked like. Ethan and I had been talking about our future for months now. Just last week, he'd mentioned something about taking the next step. I'd assumed he meant with me, not with Avery. The shower stopped. I closed the drawer and moved away from the dresser, trying to compose my face into something that didn't scream, "I just discovered you're planning to propose to my sister." My sister, who had introduced us at that charity gala 2.5 years ago. My sister, who Ethan always said reminded him of a young Michelle Pfeiffer. My sister, who excelled at everything without even trying. Ethan appeared in the doorway, towel wrapped around his waist, droplets of water still clinging to his shoulders. His smile was the same as always, slightly crooked, revealing the chipped tooth from a childhood baseball accident. How could he look so normal when everything had changed? "Ready?" he asked. I managed to say, my voice surprisingly steady, "I'll keep looking." I moved toward his desk, pretending to search while my mind raced through every interaction between Ethan and Avery. The lingering hug at Christmas. The inside joke at my birthday party. The time I caught them whispering. They both straightened up and suddenly went silent when I entered the room. Ethan grabbed a t-shirt from his closet. "If you can't find them, we can stop by the store on our way to dinner. No big deal." Dinner? We were supposed to meet Avery for dinner tonight. The irony made me want to laugh, but I was afraid if I started, it would turn into screaming or worse, crying. I pulled open a desk drawer at random, and there, as if the universe was playing some cosmic joke, lay a pair of scissors. "Found them," I said, holding them up like a trophy I didn't want. "Great, I'll be ready in 5, he said, and disappeared back into the bathroom humming that same Bruno Mars song. I stood frozen, scissors in hand, trying to decide what to do with the knowledge weighing heavy in my chest. My phone buzzed with a text. "Avery can't wait to see you guys tonight. I have exciting news to share." My stomach clenched. Exciting news. Was this it? Was tonight the night my boyfriend and sister would announce their betrayal? I scrolled back through our text history, something I'd never done before. There it was, 3 weeks ago. The surprise is coming together. Ethan is so excited. And last week, got the measurements you asked for. She has no idea. Each message hit me like a physical blow. They weren't even trying to hide it well. By the time Ethan emerged fully dressed, I'd worked myself into a state of cold fury. "Ready to go?" he asked, keys jingling in his hand. "Actually," I said, setting the scissors down carefully, "I'm not feeling well. I think I should go home." His concern immediately crossed his face. He stepped closer, reaching to feel my forehead. I flinched away. "Nothing, just a headache," I lied, the words coming easily. "Rain check on dinner?" Of course, he said, his voice laced with concern. I'll call Avery and reschedule. Let me drive you home. No, I said too quickly. No thanks. I can drive myself. You should still meet Avery. Sounds like she has exciting news. I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Just go enjoy your dinner with my sister. Ethan frowned, his eyebrows furrowing. What does that mean? Nothing, just go, I said, grabbing my purse and heading for the door. Lily, wait. He caught my arm. What's going on? Did something happen? I could have confronted him then, demanded answers. But suddenly I couldn't bear to hear him admit it. I couldn't stand to watch him fumble through excuses, or worse, tell me he'd fallen for Avery. Let go of me, Ethan, I said, my tone sharp. Something in my voice made him release my arm. You're scaring me, he said. Talk to me. There's nothing to talk about, I said, reaching for the door handle. Have fun tonight, I added, the words feeling hollow. I'm not going without you. He insisted. If you're not feeling well, I want to take care of you. The sincerity in his voice almost broke me. How could he sound so genuine while planning to propose to my sister? I don't need you to take care of me, I said. Not now, not ever. I left him standing there, confusion etched across his face in the hallway of his apartment building. My phone rang. Ethan. I silenced it. Then it rang again. Avery. This time, of course, they were already coordinating. I turned my phone off completely by the time I reached my car. Tears were streaming down my face. I sat behind the wheel, unable to start the engine, replaying every moment of our relationship, wondering if I'd been blind all along. Had they been? Laughing at me. Poor, naive Lily. So trusting, so easily deceived. Another thought struck me. What if Avery didn't even want him? What if she was trying to let him down gently, preserve our relationship? No, the texts were too enthusiastic. She was excited about the surprise. And really, who would turn down Ethan? Successful, kind, gorgeously rumpled Ethan with his infectious laugh and the way he always remembered everyone's coffee order. I finally started the car. I couldn't go home. Avery might come looking for me. I couldn't go to my parents. They'd take one look at my face and demand answers I wasn't ready to give. I needed to think, to breathe, to figure out what to do with this shattered version of my life. As I pulled away from Ethan's building, I made a decision. If my boyfriend and sister wanted to be together, fine. They could have each other, but they would have to do it. Without me watching, I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew one thing for certain. By morning, Lily Porter would be gone. I drove aimlessly for hours, tears blurring the streetlights into starbursts. My phone remained off, stuffed into the glove compartment like it was radioactive. By midnight, I found myself at a 24-hour diner off the highway, staring into a mug of coffee gone cold. The waitress, a woman with kind eyes and hair dyed an improbable shade of purple, had stopped asking if I wanted a refill and just left me alone with my thoughts. Those thoughts weren't good company. The decision came suddenly, like jumping off a cliff. I paid my bill, leaving a tip that made the waitress's eyebrows shoot up, and headed to an ATM. I withdrew as much cash as my daily limit allowed, just enough to disappear for a while. My grandmother's beach house in Port Haven came to mind, empty since her move to Florida last year, still furnished and, most importantly, a place neither Ethan nor Avery would think to look immediately. Grandma had always told me the key was under the ceramic turtle by the back door if I ever needed a sanctuary. I never thought I'd need one from my own sister and boyfriend. Dawn was breaking as I pulled into a gas station. I bought snacks, a baseball cap, and large sunglasses, my pathetic attempt at a disguise. The cashier, half asleep and thoroughly uninterested, didn't even look at my face. I couldn't decide if that was reassuring or depressing. In the grimy bathroom, I stared at my reflection. I looked like a stranger already. Red-rimmed eyes, a pale face, hair tangled from running my hands through it repeatedly. Good. A stranger was exactly what I wanted to be. Back on the road, I finally turned my phone on. Immediately, a cascade of notification sounds followed. 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, and 3 voicemails. Ethan and Avery were increasingly frantic. I sent one text to my boss claiming a family emergency and turned the phone off again. I wasn't ready to face their explanations or excuses. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The universe, however, seemed determined to throw obstacles in my path of dramatic exit. Just outside of Springdale, a town I'd never heard of and certainly never planned to visit, my car made an ominous clunking sound, shuddered violently, and died. I barely managed to coast into the parking lot of a place called House Hardware and More. The More, as it turned out, was a small auto repair shop attached to the back of the hardware store. Fuel pumps shot, Hal himself declared after poking around under my hood for approximately 30 seconds. He was a beaut of a man with weathered hands and suspenders that strained across his substantial belly. "Can order the part, but it won't be here till Monday," he added, giving me a glance that clearly indicated his lack of sympathy. "Monday?" I repeated, dumbfounded. "It's Friday," he shrugged, as if that explained everything. Maybe it did. Got a place to stay? I didn't. The realization must have shown on my face because his expression softened. "My daughter runs a little B&B 2 blocks down. Nothing fancy, but clean. Tell her I sent you, and she'll give you the family rate." This wasn't part of my dramatic disappearing act. I was supposed to be sobbing elegantly in my grandmother's beach house by now, not stranded in a town smaller than most shopping malls. But my options were limited, so I thanked Hal and wheeled my hastily packed suitcase down. Springdale's single Main Street. The B&B turned out to be a converted Victorian house, painted a cheerful yellow with a sign proclaiming it the Sunshine Inn. The daughter was a woman about my age named Meredith, with her father's kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. When I tried to pay with my credit card, she waved it away. "Dad called. You're all set for the weekend?" she asked. "Cash only around here anyway," she added. I must have looked suspicious because she laughed. "Small-town hospitality, not small-town kidnapping, I promise. You look like you could use a break." The room she showed me was simple, but comfortable, with a patchwork quilt on the bed and lace curtains that fluttered in the breeze from the open window. For the first time since finding the ring, I felt something loosen in my chest. "Thank you," I managed to say. "Breakfast is from 7 to 9, Meredith said, heading for the door. "And if you need anything, just holler. We don't stand on ceremony here." She paused, hand on the doorframe. "And honey, whatever you're running from, it probably looks worse than it is." I wasn't ready to believe that, but I nodded anyway. After she left, I sank onto the bed and finally allowed myself to sob, muffling the sound with a pillow. I cried until I had nothing left, until exhaustion pulled me under into a dreamless sleep. I woke disoriented as evening light slanted through the unfamiliar window. For one blessed moment, I didn't remember. Then it all came flooding back. The ring, the receipt, the texts, my impulsive flight. I splashed cold water on my face and ventured downstairs, drawn by the smell of food and the low murmur of voices in the dining room. The Sunshine Inn doubled as a local gathering spot. Apparently, 6 people sat around a large farmhouse. Table, passing dishes, family style. Meredith waved me over just in time. "Hope you like pot roast." Before I could retreat, I was seated between a retired school teacher named Dorothy and a man introduced as Jack, the owner of the town's only bookstore. A plate heaped with food appeared in front of me, and conversation flowed around me like I was a rock in a stream. No one asked why I was there or where I'd come from. Perhaps in a town this small, everyone had secrets they respected. Jack passed me a basket of rolls. "First time in Springdale?" he asked quietly. I nodded, taking a roll to avoid elaborating. "Most people only come here if they're lost," he said with a half-smile that somehow didn't feel judgmental. "I'm not lost," I said automatically. "I meant metaphorically," he clarified. his blue eyes seeming to have seen far too much, though the literal often follows the metaphorical. In my experience, I should have been annoyed at his presumption, but something in his tone, gentle, understanding, without pity, broke through my carefully constructed walls. "Maybe I am a little lost," I admitted, surprised at my own honesty. He nodded as if I'd confirmed something for him. "Well, Springdale is a good place to be found again. No rush, though." I spent the next few days falling into an unexpected routine. Mornings at the Sunshine Inn, helping Meredith serve breakfast to the occasional tourists passing through. Afternoons at Books and Brew, Jack's combination bookstore and coffee shop, where I'd started reorganizing his hopelessly chaotic shelving system. Evenings were often spent on Dorothy's porch, listening to stories about Springdale's past while fireflies blinked in the gathering darkness. I'd given everyone a simplified version of my situation: boyfriend troubles, needed space, car broke down. No one pressed for details. It was a courtesy I deeply appreciated. Jack was the easiest to be around. He asked no questions about my past, seemed content discussing books and ideas, and somehow knew when I needed silence. He had his own mysteries: Harvard education that he never explained, occasional phone calls that left him quiet and withdrawn, and a reluctance to discuss anything before his arrival in Springdale 5 years ago. We recognized in each other a certain carefulness, a guarding of wounds not yet healed. It created an understanding between us that required no words. One afternoon, as I was shelving a new shipment of mysteries, Jack appeared with 2 cups of coffee. "Festival committee meeting just ended," he said, handing me a mug. "You've been volunteered." I accepted the coffee, raising an eyebrow at the volunteered part. "For what, exactly?" "The Springdale Annual Summer Solstice Festival. Every store contributes something. We're doing a book swap and a fortune-telling booth." He sipped his coffee, twinkling over the rim. "Dorothy insists you have the perfect aura for a fortune-teller." I laughed, something I was doing more frequently these days. "I can't even predict what I'm having for dinner tonight. How am I supposed to tell fortunes? It's all ambiguous statements and dramatic pauses." Jack assured me, "You'll be perfect." He hesitated, then added, "Unless you're planning to leave before then. The festival's this weekend." The question underneath was clear. How long was I staying? My car still wasn't ready. I hitched, right? Jack nodded, clearly not believing the car excuse any more than I did. "Well, if you're still around, the fortune-telling booth could use your particular brand of skeptical optimism." I was forming a reply when my attention was caught by the television mounted in the coffee shop corner. Jack usually kept it on mute, tuned to weather forecasts or local news. Today, however, the screen showed a familiar face, my face, alongside a headline about a missing woman. I froze, the coffee mug halfway to my lips. Jack followed my gaze, confusion crossing his features until understanding dawned. "That's you," he said quietly, not a question. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. He grabbed the remote and unmuted the TV. Lily Porter, missing for over 2 weeks. Family and friends are increasingly concerned, saying her disappearance is completely out of character. Porter was last seen leaving her boyfriend's apartment in an emotionally distressed state. Police say there's no evidence of foul play, but are asking anyone with information to come forward. The screen cut to Avery. She looked different, disheveled, eyes red-rimmed. "Lily, if you're watching this, please come home. Whatever you think happened, you're wrong. I've never seen Ethan so devastated. We all just want to know you're safe. Please, just call." Jack silently turned off the TV as I sank into a chair, feeling as though I could no longer support myself. "I'm a Porter," he said, testing the name. "I've been calling you, ma'am." He paused, his voice soft. "That's what Avery calls me." "Only Avery," I whispered. "Only Avery," Jack repeated quietly. We sat in silence for a long moment before Jack spoke again. "You're not just running from boyfriend troubles, are you?" The question broke something in me. The whole story poured out. Finding the ring, the receipt with Avery's ring size, the the suspicious texts, my assumptions and fears, my flight. Jack listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When I finally fell silent, he disappeared into the back room without a word. I sat frozen, staring at the space he had vacated, feeling as though I'd just lost the one person in Springdale I considered a genuine friend. He returned moments later with a laptop. "I think you need to see something," he said, placing it in front of me. The screen showed a social media page, Avery's. Jack scrolled through recent posts until he stopped on one from a week ago, a photo of Ethan and Avery together, surrounded by what looked like fabric swatches, with the caption, "Wedding planning is hard when the bride disappears. Lily, wherever you are, your color scheme awaits. Find Lily. Missing you." I stared at the words, uncomprehending. Wedding planning? But I thought, "Keep reading," Jack urged gently. The next post showed Ethan alone, holding the very ring I'd found, looking utterly miserable. The caption read, "He finally picked the perfect ring. Use my size for reference since you two have exactly the same taste. The proposal was supposed to be tomorrow. Come home, Lily. He loved you first. He still does." My world tilted on its axis. "She was helping him," I whispered, the realization slowly creeping in. The ring had been for me all along. The texts, the secret meetings, the surprise, everything had been part of a proposal I'd never let happen. Jack's hand covered mine. "Looks like you have some calls to make." But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to process this revelation. I needed to face the reality that I had disappeared, caused pain, and worried people, because I jumped to the worst possible conclusion. I can't just call and say, "Surprise, I'm alive. Sorry for thinking the worst of you both." "Why not?" Jack asked simply. I can't," I said helplessly, "because I've spent weeks hiding in a town no one's ever heard of, because I didn't trust either of them enough to ask a simple question, because My voice broke. "I don't know how to go back to being the person I was." Jack's expression softened. "Maybe you don't go back. Maybe you go forward, as the person you've become." I looked at him, this man who had become a friend when I needed one most, and who was still here. "Someone braver than she gives herself credit for," he said without hesitation. "Someone who takes risks, even if they are sometimes the wrong ones. Someone who can admit her mistakes and face the consequences. Someone worth waiting for." The summer solstice festival arrived with perfect weather, and the entire town was in a celebratory mood. True to my word, I sat in Jack's fortune-telling booth, draped in scarves borrowed from Dorothy, reading palms and tarot cards with dramatic flair and vague predictions that delighted the tourists between customers. I kept checking my phone. I'd finally turned it back on, but hadn't yet called Ethan or Avery. I'd composed dozens of messages in my head, deleted them all, started over. Nothing seemed adequate to explain my absence or my return. The day was winding down, and as twilight softened the edges of the day, Jack appeared at the booth. "Last customer," he said, sliding onto the stool across from me. I arched an eyebrow. "Falling into character?" I asked. "You seek answers, traveler," Jack teased, extending his palm. I played along. "You seek to know if a certain fortune teller will finally make the call she's been avoiding all day." Jack's other hand covered mine, stilling my movements. "Lily, it's time." He was right. With trembling fingers, I dialed Ethan's number, half expecting it to go straight to voicemail after all this. Time. Instead, he answered on the first ring. "Hello?" His voice, so achingly familiar, sounded weary, as if he'd been bound by hope too many times. "It's me," I said softly. "It's Lily." There was a long pause before Ethan spoke again. "Lily?" His voice cracked slightly. Where are you?" "I'm okay," I said, the words tasting strange in my mouth. "I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. I should have trusted you." He was silent for a long time before finally saying, "I've been waiting for you. I've been so worried. You were gone, and I didn't know what happened." "I know," I whispered. "I should have told you the truth." Ethan sighed, his relief palpable even through the phone. "You scared me, Lily. I didn't know if you were coming back." "I didn't know if I was either," I admitted quietly. "But I'm here now. I'll explain everything, I promise." "I'm so glad you're safe," he said, his voice full of emotion. "Can we meet?" "I'll be there soon," I replied. The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls, apologies, and understanding. I returned to Springdale, and I saw Ethan and Avery separately. My heart ached as I spoke to each of them, realizing how much damage had been done by my assumptions, by my inability to communicate. Avery was patient, understanding, even apologetic about the way things had been handled. Ethan was heartbroken but grateful that I was finally back. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect. But we were all trying to rebuild, trying to find our way back to one another. The weeks that followed were full of small, careful steps. Coffee dates with Ethan, long talks with Avery, working through the misunderstandings and hurt. It was like trying to put together a shattered vase, piece by piece, without knowing if the cracks would always show. There were moments of doubt, moments when I wondered if I'd ever be able to fully forgive myself or them. But there were also moments of hope, moments when I saw the light glimmering through the cracks, showing that maybe, just maybe, there was something worth salvaging. And as I sat in Jack's bookstore one evening, reading through the latest shipment of mysteries, I realized something. I had finally come back to myself. Not the person I was before, but someone new, someone stronger, someone who understood that life wasn't always about perfection. It was about growth, about learning to accept the mistakes and move forward. Jack had been right. Maybe I didn't go back. Maybe I went forward. As I walked out of Books and Brew that night, I felt a weight lift from my chest. The air felt lighter. The world felt a little less heavy. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I was ready to face it. A few weeks passed since I returned to Springdale. I still wasn't sure if I'd fully forgiven myself, let alone Ethan or Avery, but we were trying. Slowly, carefully, putting the pieces back together. One Sunday morning, I found myself sitting across from Avery in the local cafe. The sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow on the worn wooden tables. It was a quiet morning. The usual hum of the cafe was subdued, just the gentle clinking of coffee cups and soft conversations from other patrons. Avery was stirring her coffee, her expression thoughtful. She had apologized countless times for the way things had unfolded, for the way she had kept secrets from me. But this was the first time we had a real, uninterrupted conversation about what happened. "You know, I never meant for it to go this far," Avery said quietly, her voice tinged with regret. "I thought I could help. I thought I was doing the right thing." I watched her, studying the sincerity in her eyes. There was no bitterness there, no resentment, just an understanding that things had been broken and needed time to heal. "I know you didn't," I said, my voice soft. "But the truth is, I jumped to conclusions. I ran away instead of talking to you to Ethan." Avery smiled faintly. "I wish you had trusted us. I wish you had known how much we both cared about you. I would never do anything to hurt you." "I know," I whispered. "It's just, I was so scared. I saw the ring and I thought—" I stopped myself, my breath catching. I couldn't believe how much fear had driven my actions. Avery reached across the table, her hand warm on mine. "It's okay. We're both here now, and we're going to fix this. Together." We sat there for a while, talking about the past and the present. It wasn't easy. There were still cracks that needed mending, but it felt different this time. This time, we were facing the truth, not running from it. Later that evening, I met with Ethan at Books and Brew. We sat on the old leather couches, nursing our cups of coffee. The place was quiet, the only sound the occasional murmur of conversation from the back room and the rustle of pages turning. Ethan looked at me with the same tenderness I remembered, but there was something new in his eyes, a kind of understanding, like he knew the journey we were on would be a long one. "I never wanted to hurt you, Lily," he said, his voice low. I didn't know how to ask." I nodded, feeling a pang of guilt in my chest. I had assumed so much without ever asking the questions that really mattered. "I know," I said quietly, "and I didn't give you a chance. I'm sorry." Ethan squeezed my hand. "We've both made mistakes, but I think we're on the right track now." There was so much left unsaid between us, so many things we still needed to talk through. But in that moment, sitting together in the cozy coffee shop, I felt something stir within me, a glimmer of hope. Maybe we could make it work. Maybe we could start over, even if it was messy and complicated. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the future. A few days later, I got a call from Jack. He had been calling me off and on, and I hadn't been sure if I was ready to talk to him. But today, something in me shifted. I picked up the phone and listened as Jack's familiar voice filled the line. "You doing okay, Lily?" he asked. There was no judgment, no pressure, just a friend checking in. "I think I am," I said, finally admitting the truth to myself. "I'm figuring it out." "That's good," Jack said with a smile I could almost hear. In his voice, "You've come a long way." "I think we all have," I replied, thinking of Ethan, Avery, and myself. We had a lot of work ahead, but we were getting there step by step. As I hung up the phone, I realized something. Life wasn't about having all the answers. It wasn't about getting everything right. It was about growing, learning, and trying to be the best version of yourself, even when things were messy. And as I walked through Springdale, the town that had become a place of healing, I felt something inside me shift. The future didn't seem so uncertain anymore. The path ahead wasn't as scary as it once had been. I had made my way through the darkness, and now I was finally ready to step into the light. The weeks flew by in a blur. Springdale, once just a stop on my way to nowhere, had become my refuge. I found myself immersed in the simple rhythm of life. Coffee dates with Ethan, quiet mornings helping Meredith at the Sunshine Inn, afternoons spent getting lost in books at Books and Brew. Jack and I had developed a deeper friendship, built on shared silences and the unspoken understanding that we both had our wounds, but we weren't defined by them. Ethan and I, however, were taking things slowly. He didn't rush me. He understood that there was no going back to what we had. Instead, we were building something new, piece by piece. The first few days felt like we were strangers, learning to communicate, learning each other again. But then something started to click. Small gestures, holding hands for the first time in weeks, a shared laugh over something silly, moments of quiet understanding, began to stitch the fabric of our relationship back together. We weren't perfect, but we were trying, and that was enough. One evening after dinner at the Sunshine Inn, Ethan and I walked down Main Street, the warm evening air cooling the heat of the day. We didn't speak much, but the silence felt comfortable, like we didn't need words to understand each other anymore. As we passed Books and Brew, Ethan stopped and looked at me. His expression was serious, but there was something in his eyes, a softness, a tenderness that had been absent before. "I never meant to hurt you, Lily," he said quietly. "You've got to know that." I nodded, my heart aching. "I know, Ethan, I know, and I'm sorry too. I should have trusted you." Ethan's hand found mine, and we stood there for a moment, just holding on to each other. It wasn't a grand declaration. There were no fireworks, no promises of forever. But in that moment, I knew something had shifted. We were on the right path. We continued walking, the soft sound of our footsteps the only noise between us. I glanced up at the stars above, a faint smile tugging at the corners of my lips. For the first time in months, I didn't feel lost anymore. The road ahead still felt uncertain, but it wasn't as frightening. With Ethan by my side, I felt like I could face whatever came next. We didn't have all the answers, but we had each other, and that was enough. Later that night, after Ethan dropped me off at the Sunshine Inn, I sat on the porch, watching the last traces of daylight fade away. It was then that I realized how much I had changed. I had started out on this journey running from my fears, convinced that leaving everything behind would bring me peace. But the truth was, peace came when I stopped running, when I faced the truth, when I allowed myself to trust again. My phone buzzed and I pulled it out of my bag. It was a message from Avery. "I miss you, Lily. I'm glad we're talking again. I know we've both made mistakes, but I want to move forward. Together. I hope you can forgive me." I stared at the message for a long moment. The past few weeks had been full of so many emotions: anger, fear, hurt. But as I read Avery's words, I realized something. Forgiveness wasn't just about letting go of the past. It was about accepting it, understanding that people made mistakes and that those mistakes didn't define them. I took a deep breath and typed a reply. "I miss you too, Avery. We'll figure this out. I'm glad we're both here." I hit send and put the phone down, feeling the weight of the past few months begin to lift. Tomorrow I would face the future, not with fear, but with hope. As I stood up and walked inside, the door closing softly behind me, I realized that I wasn't running anymore. I had come home. The days began to stretch into weeks, and life in Springdale started to feel almost normal. I continued helping Meredith at the Sunshine Inn in the mornings, the rhythm of daily work grounding me, giving me purpose. Jack and I spent more time together, sometimes talking about books, other times just sitting in comfortable silence. His presence had become a steady anchor in the shifting seas of my emotions. And Ethan and I were growing, slowly but steadily, one moment at a time. We hadn't rushed anything, and I appreciated that. There were no grand gestures, no attempts to force something that wasn't ready. Instead, we spent afternoons walking through the quiet streets of Springdale, or sometimes just sitting together, talking about everything and nothing. I was learning how to trust again, not just him, but myself. One evening, as I was closing up the inn for the night, I found myself lost in thought as I gazed out at the small town square. The night was cool, the sky dotted with stars, and the soft hum of crickets filled the air. It was peaceful here, in a way I hadn't expected. I had thought that running away would solve everything, but it hadn't. It had only made me realize how much I missed the simple, everyday moments. It made me realize how much I needed the people who truly cared about me. As I locked the door, I felt a tap on my shoulder and turned to find Ethan standing behind me, a hesitant smile on his face. "Hey," he said softly. "I was hoping you might have a moment." "Always for you," I replied with a smile, though my heart was racing a little. "What's up?" Ethan stepped closer, his hands stuffed in the pockets of his jacket. There was a nervous energy about him that I hadn't seen in a while. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice uncertain. "We've been taking things slow, and I think I'm ready for the next step. But I want to make sure that we're doing it right, that we're doing it together." I blinked, unsure if I was hearing him right. "Next step?" Ethan nodded, his gaze softening. "I don't know what that looks like for us yet, but I think we need to talk about what's next, what we want from this, from us." The words hung in the air for a moment, and I felt a warmth spread through my chest. It wasn't about rushing things or forcing a future that wasn't ready. It was about facing it together in our own time. I think I'm ready for that, too," I said, my voice steady but full of emotion. "We've been through a lot, Ethan, but I believe in us. I believe in what we can build together." He smiled, a true smile, one that made his eyes light up in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. "I'm glad to hear that." We stood there for a few moments, just looking at each other. It was a quiet moment, but it was filled with so much meaning. I realized that this was the turning point, where the past no longer had a hold over us, where we could finally start building the future we both wanted. As we walked down the street together, the sound of our footsteps echoed in the stillness of the night. I realized how far I had come, how much I had grown, and I couldn't help but smile at the thought of what was to come. We didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the questions. The next few days felt like a dream, like I was waking up from a long, painful sleep. Ethan and I continued to take things slow, but now there was something different. A quiet understanding between us, a sense of purpose, of direction. We didn't need to rush into anything, but we were both ready for what came next. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, and the shadows of the past seemed to grow smaller with each passing day. Meredith had taken to teasing me about the quiet romance I had going with Ethan. I'd laugh it off, but part of me appreciated the way things were unfolding. No drama, no rush, just two people figuring things out. Slowly but steadily, we were becoming what we needed to be to each other. Jack and I spent more time together, too. The bookstore had become my sanctuary. I'd spend hours shelving books, reorganizing sections, and discussing stories, sometimes with Jack, sometimes on my own. It wasn't about escaping the world anymore. It was about creating a space where I could breathe, where I could feel at home. One afternoon, as the sun was beginning to set, I found myself standing on the porch of the Sunshine Inn, staring out at the town square. The quiet of the evening had a calming effect on me. I had been so restless for so long, so full of anger and fear that I hadn't known how to calm the storm inside me. But now, in this moment, I felt still. Ethan arrived just as the last rays of the sun dipped behind the horizon. He smiled at me as he approached, his presence a quiet reassurance. He'd been my steady rock through everything, even when I didn't deserve it, even when I didn't believe in myself. "Hey, you," he said, standing beside me. His voice was soft, but there was strength in it. "Hey," I replied, my heart warming at the sight of him. "How was your day?" "It was good. Better now," he said with a wink. He reached out and took my hand, his fingers warm and steady in mine. "I was thinking, we could take a trip, maybe to the beach or somewhere else. Just us, no distractions. We could really talk about what's next. I know we've been taking things slow, but I think it's time to figure out what we want." I turned to look at him, my heart racing. A trip. Just the two of us. It sounded perfect. "Are you sure?" I asked, a little hesitant. We'd been moving forward cautiously, but the idea of taking a bigger step, of leaving everything behind for a while, felt like the right thing to do. Ethan smiled, a genuine, tender smile. "Yeah, I'm sure. We've got time to figure things out, but I think we need a fresh start, a chance to reconnect without all the noise." I felt a rush of emotions in that moment, fear, excitement, and a deep sense of peace. I knew this trip would be more than just a vacation. It would be a chance for us to truly see each other, to explore the future we were building, away from everything else. "I think that sounds perfect," I said, my voice full of sincerity. I knew that whatever came next, we'd be able to face it together. We didn't have all the answers yet, but we were finally in sync, finally understanding each other. We stood there hand in hand, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. It was a moment of quiet contentment, something I hadn't known I needed until I had it. "We'll make it through this," Ethan said softly, his voice steady. "I know," I replied, squeezing his hand. "Together." And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed it. The beach trip came sooner than I expected. It was a quiet weekend getaway, just Ethan and me, no distractions, no plans beyond enjoying each other's company. We rented a small cottage by the sea, nestled in a quiet corner of the coast, where the waves rolled gently against the shore, and the air smelled of salt and freedom. It felt like the world had shrunk down to just the two of us. There were no calls, no texts, just the sound of the ocean and our voices. We spent the first morning walking alongs. The beach, the sand cool beneath our feet. I had missed moments like this, moments where time seemed to stretch and bend, where the world could feel still and at peace. Ethan had brought a picnic basket, and we sat on a blanket, the sound of the waves providing the perfect background as we ate and talked about everything and nothing. We discussed books, old memories, the future, and laughed at our own silly jokes. I felt light. "You know," Ethan said, breaking a piece of bread, "I've been thinking about what you said the other day, about the future." I looked at him, curious. "What about it?" "About how we don't have all the answers yet," he said, his voice thoughtful. "I think you're right. We don't. But we've got time to figure it out, and that's enough for me." I smiled softly, the warmth of his words settling in my chest. I think that's all we can ask for, isn't it? Time to figure it out together. Ethan nodded, reaching for my hand. "Exactly. And that's why I wanted to bring you here, to take a moment away from everything and just be." We sat there for a while, watching the tide roll in and out, letting the rhythm of the waves calm our thoughts. It wasn't perfect. There were still questions, still uncertainties about what came next, but it felt like we were on the right path. The uncertainty didn't feel so heavy anymore. It wasn't about knowing exactly what the future held. It was about knowing that we would face it together, whatever it might bring. Later that evening, after a walk along the shore as the sky turned pink and orange, we returned to our cottage. The sea breeze was cooler now, and the stars had started to appear in the night sky. We sat on the porch with a glass of wine, just looking out over the water. The air was filled with the sound of crickets and the distant call of a seagull. "You know," I said, breaking the silence, "I never thought I'd end up here, like this, with you." Ethan raised an eyebrow, his gaze warm and steady. "What do you mean?" I smiled, the words coming more easily than I expected. "I used to think I had it all figured out. I thought I could control everything, control my life. But then I found the ring and I ran. I ran from everything, not knowing that what I needed was right in front of me." Ethan reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "You don't have to have it all figured out. Neither do I, but we'll figure it out together." I leaned in, letting the simplicity of the moment wash over me. There were no grand declarations, no promises of forever, but I knew, deep in my heart, that we were building something real, something that didn't need to be rushed, something that would unfold in its own time. The night wore on, and we eventually went inside, tired but content. As I lay in bed, the sound of the ocean outside lulling me to sleep, I realized something. This was where I was meant to be. Not running, not hiding, but living in the moment, embracing the uncertainty, the unknowns, and trusting that no matter what, I had the strength to face whatever came next. With Ethan by my side, I wasn't afraid anymore. We stayed at the beach for a few more days, each one passing like a peaceful dream. I found myself becoming more at ease, more open to the idea of what was to come. The trip had been just what we needed. Time away, time to breathe, time to let go of the weight of everything that had happened before. The day we left the beach, the air was warm and soft, and we drove back to Springdale, the windows down, the wind in our hair. It was a long drive, but it felt right, driving side. By side, no rush, just the two of us on the open road. We didn't talk much, but there was a comfort in the silence, a comfort in knowing that we didn't need words to understand each other. When we returned to the small town, I was greeted by the familiar sights of Springdale. Quiet streets, the same cozy bookstore where I'd spent countless afternoons, and the Sunshine Inn, where Meredith waved at me from the porch. I felt a strange sense of homecoming, like I had finally found my place again. It wasn't perfect, and there were still things we needed to work through, but it felt like the beginning of something new. Ethan and I spent the next week back in our routine, though now it felt more like a partnership. We spent evenings together talking about the future, about everything and nothing, just like before. But this time, there was a new sense of openness between us. We didn't shy away from the difficult conversations. We talked about our hopes, our fears, and the steps we would take to build a future together. One evening, after dinner, Ethan took me by the hand and led me to the small park just off Main Street. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, and the air was crisp, the kind of evening that made everything feel still and perfect. He stopped in the middle of the park and turned to me. "Lily," he said softly, his eyes searching mine. "I've been thinking about what's next for us. I know we've been moving slow, but I think we're ready for the next step. Are you?" I felt a flutter of nervousness in my chest, but I knew what he meant. The same sense of certainty that had guided us through the past few months washed over me. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I think I'm ready." Ethan smiled, his face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in a while. "I'm glad to hear that. I don't know what it looks like yet, but I know that whatever it is, we'll figure it out. Together." I smiled back, my heart swelling. Together. And as we stood there in the fading light of the evening, the world around us quiet and peaceful, I knew that we were both ready to face whatever came next, together. We didn't have a plan, not exactly, but that was okay. We had each other, and that was enough. The next few months passed in a blur of small, meaningful moments. Ethan and I continued to build our future, one day at a time. We spent weekends exploring nearby towns, finding new spots to enjoy together, and nights curled up with books, talking about everything and nothing. There were still moments of doubt, of course. The past didn't just disappear because we wanted it to. But with each passing day, I found myself less haunted by the ghosts of what we'd been through. Springdale, once a place I had run to in search of escape, had become home in ways I never thought possible. The town had wrapped itself around me in the gentlest of ways, a constant reminder that sometimes the most healing thing you can do is give yourself the space to breathe, to stop running, to stop hiding. And then, one sunny afternoon, while we were sitting on the porch of the Sunshine Inn, Ethan turned to me, his eyes warm, his smile never quite leaving his lips. "Lily," he began, his voice quiet but full of purpose. "I've been thinking about us, about everything we've been through, and I know I don't need to ask this, but I'm going to anyway." I looked at him, my heart skipping a beat. "What do you mean?" Ethan took my hand, his thumb tracing circles over my knuckles. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Lily. I want to build something that lasts, something real." My breath caught in my throat. There, in the stillness of the afternoon, the words hung between us like a promise we'd both known was coming, but had never quite dared to speak. "I want that too," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "More than anything." Ethan smiled, a beautiful, full smile that lit up his face. "Then will you marry me, Lily?" I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to hesitate. My heart knew the answer, as if it had always known. "Yes," I said, the word falling from my lips like a promise to the future. "Yes, I will." And in that moment, everything shifted. The fear, the uncertainty, the weight of the past, it all seemed to melt away, leaving nothing but the two of us, standing on the edge of a new beginning. A beginning that we would face together, hand in hand. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of laughter and happy tears. I called Avery, of course, to tell her the news, and she was as excited as I was. Ethan and I talked about our plans, not knowing exactly what they would look like, but knowing we'd face them together, just like we always had. A few days later, Ethan and I sat down with Jack at Books and Brew, enjoying a quiet drink, reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this moment. Jack was the first to toast us, his eyes warm and proud. "To new beginnings," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "To us, I said, raising my glass. To love, Ethan added, his voice soft, but with a strength that echoed in my chest. And as we clinked our glasses together, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. The ring I had found in Ethan's drawer so many months ago had been meant for me all along. The betrayal I had feared had been nothing more than a misunderstanding, a moment of doubt that had led me to discover not just the truth, but a version of myself I never knew existed. The past, with all its pain and uncertainty, had brought me here, to this moment, to Ethan, to love. And as the evening stretched on, with the soft hum of conversation around us, I realized something that I hadn't known when I first came to Springdale. The truth wasn't something to fear, it was something to embrace. I wasn't the same person I had been when I arrived. I had learned to trust again, to love without hesitation, and to believe that sometimes the best things in life are the ones you never see coming. The future wasn't perfect, but with Ethan by my side, it was mine, ours. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to face it.